Aloha, good afternoon. I will be talking about the famous speech from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which is I Have a Dream.
Learn about in school.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King Jr. What'd he do?
He died for our sins.
No, that was learn about in school.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, I just thought that it was a funny video that I wanted to add to my slide. But I know some of us can relate here. I know like there's only few students who are domestic students from our class, and most of us are international students. And most of us may not be that familiar with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. For me, when I was in high school, I mean, throughout my life, I've only heard about MLK once during high school, and we never talked about him again. So I only learned about him again when I went here to the United States. So I have prepared some of these questions here just to refresh some of our knowledge about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So if you have a pen with you or a notebook, or if you just want to remember your answers for this quiz, and I will show the answers like in a bit. It's very easy questions. First question: Who is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Was he a former U.S. president, a civil rights leader, a teacher, or founder of Protestantism? So again, remember the letter of your answer. Second question: Where was the I Have a Dream speech delivered? A. At the CAC, B. At Central Park in New York City, C. In Washington, D.C., or D. in Chicago? What was the main issue he fought for? A. Tariffs, B. Immigration, C. LGBTQ plus rights, or D. Racial equality? And what inspired Martin Luther King Jr.'s approach to nonviolence? A. Military training, B. Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy, C. News from TikTok, or D. U.S. government from the U.S. government? And what was MLK's profession? A. Engineer, B. Medical doctor, C. Pastor or minister, or D. Politician? And for the last question, question number 6, which award did he receive for his efforts in peace and equality? A. Pulitzer Prize, B. Grammy Awards, C. Academy Awards, or D. Nobel Peace Prize? Well, I know the answers are quite obvious, but if you are now ready to check your answers, this is the answer key. Yeah. So, yeah, just check your answer. And now let's learn more about the March on Washington and how the dream unfolds. So, let's learn about the context of the famous I Have a Dream speech. So, of course, it was a public speech that was delivered by the American civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. It happened in the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., and this speech was a defining moment of the American civil rights movement. For context, this was delivered on August 28, 1963. There were about 250,000 supporters who attended this event, or this is the estimated number of people who attended the March on Washington in 1963, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered the speech. And the goal of this speech, or the goal of this march, um, His stirring words called for an end to racial segregation and discrimination, envisioning a future where all Americans would be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom was partly intended to demonstrate mass support for the civil rights legislation proposed by President John F. Kennedy in June. And Martin Luther King Jr. and other leaders therefore agreed to keep their speeches calm, also to avoid provoking the civil disobedience which had become the hallmark of the civil rights movement. And MLK originally designed his speech as a homage to Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, timed to correspond with the 100-year centennial of the Emancipation Proclamation. So it was really perfectly timed for the 100-year anniversary of that Emancipation Proclamation. And I know we have already read, maybe for some of you multiple times, the I Have a Dream speech, but I think there's really a difference. There's a difference in experience when we hear firsthand from the voice of Martin Luther King Jr. himself. So the next slide is the video of the speech. It's only about 6 minutes long. And then I will discuss more about that after the video.
I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. Not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Yep, I really love that speech. So these are like some of the main messages of the "I Have a Dream" speech. So the ideas that the speech, the ideas in this speech reflects his social experiences of ethnocentric abuse, the mistreatment and exploitation of African American citizens. And the speech also draws upon appeals to American myth as a nation founded to provide freedom and justice to all people, and then reinforces and transcends those secular mythologies by placing them within a spiritual context, by arguing that racial justice is also in accord with God's will, and also to give African Americans the freedom and equality that they deserve. And now the question is, why is his speech powerful? And this may be some like tips for everyone in case you want to be as impactful. I mean, when you deliver your own speech as well. His speech is powerful because it is simple and easy to understand, of course. And when he says, "I have a dream," people can imagine that future. He was able to create a strong imagery that people can picture in their minds. And it's also not just logical, but also emotional. So he was able to establish emotional connection with this speech where people can feel it. And of course, most importantly, it is a shared vision and not just his dream, but something that everyone can believe in. So now to connect it with some of the principles or theories that we learn in class, the first one that I want to connect it with is moral imagination, which is basically imagining a future that does not yet exist. So Dr. Martin Luther King did this, and during this time, of course, equality was still not a reality. But he still managed, or I mean, he was still able to like imagine it, and that imagination gave people hope. So, as a reflection, what is a moral imagination that you have that we can apply for today? Maybe it's the peace between conflicting countries right now, like in Palestine and Israel, and like Ukraine and Russia, and countries in the Middle East, and maybe USA and Iran. Um, that kind of peace that will not um, lead to a major world war or a an era where countries will surrender their nuclear weapons so that other countries will not be threatened with their presence. So yeah, it's a reflection for you. What is your moral imagination? Another theory that we learn in class that I want to connect this with is the concept of va, which focuses on relationships. And peace is not just about systems or policies, but about how people relate to each other. And MLK's dream is about restoring relationships between people of different races. And also, indigenous positionality. I think this is another thing that made his speech really effective. Indigenous positionality reminds us that people speak from their lived experience, from their own reality. So Dr. Martin Luther King was not just speaking as a leader, but as someone who also experienced injustice. So that is why his message is powerful and also authentic. Another thing or another important idea is systems thinking, where MLK understood that racism is not just about individuals but also about systems, and that his dream challenges those systems and not just the people. And I really like that he's separating the people from their behavior. So it's not looking at the oppressors as the enemy, but what they do and not their like whole character. And yeah, so now let's answer our main question, like how does vision help peace building, or how does Martin Luther King's vision helps peace building. But first, I would like to say that vision is important because it gives us direction and it helps people know where they are going. It inspires action because people believe change is possible, and it challenges injustice by showing that things can be different. And lastly, it builds a shared future that people can work together, or and it builds a shared future that people can work toward together. Yep. So now this is another reflection question. Um, what is your dream? Like Dr. Martin Luther King um, have this dream, of course, and we are also invited to have our own dream, not just for ourselves, but for our community and the world. This building starts when we imagine that future and take small steps towards it. And for me, I realized that peace building is not just about solving problems, but it's also about imagining a better future. And sometimes it is easy to focus on what is wrong, but vision helps us to focus on what is possible. So as a student and also as a like peace builder, I am still learning how to develop that kind of imagination, and I hope to bring this positive change back to my home country when I return home, and to be a positive influence or influence for good for those within my sphere of influence. So yeah, that's my presentation about I Have a Dream, and thank you so much for listening.